Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in the previous examples, we saw how to render a component using the router outlet, right? So router outlet is like a placeholder where you want, like you're telling Angular that where you want to render your routing components, like the routing file. You configure some components, right? Okay, for this route, this component; for this route, that component. So whenever you basically navigate to that route, so that particular component will be rendered. But where it will be rendered? It will be rendered where you mention this router outlet. Okay, so that example we saw already. But Angular provides us multiple router outlets also. Like you can mention multiple router outlets in the same page. Let's say if you're using the app component as a base component, then in that you can have multiple router outlets also. Okay, so in order to work, in order to make this work, basically you have to target your router outlet. Okay, so how can you configure that outlet? Using the same routing configuration, you can mention the path, you can mention the component, and then you have to mention the outlet where you want to render this component when you go to this path. Okay, the same way, same way, if you remove this one, it will be rendered by default in this one. But if you mention the outlet, then it will be rendered inside the named router outlet. Okay, this is a named router outlet. We have name for it, right? So that is how you can render. So this will be useful in some scenarios, like when you navigate to some page and you want to show different components for different sections. Okay, in that case, you can go ahead with this approach. But it will vary. Like you can basically have different component also here. But in case of if you want to do something, if you want to render something dynamically, when you navigate between the different paths, then you can go for this approach. Okay, so that is the use of using multiple outlets. So now let's move on to the navigation. So yesterday we saw the routing navigation and how we can basically navigate. Either you can basically enter this URL in the browser, then it will render the component, respective component, if it is found in that routing configuration file, or you can basically configure that in a anchor tag like this. Okay, like this or like this. Okay, you will be basically navigating to that link. Okay, basically hyperlinks are used for navigating across your web application, right? Not only web application, even for websites also. The basic navigation we can achieve by using this anchor tags. Okay, a tags. So now if you mention the href as some value, some path, then whenever you click, this event will be handled by the browser. When you say href, then when you click on this link, the request will go to the server and fetch the data again and render the page. Okay, that will be handled by the browser by default. Okay, the default behavior is this: when you click on a hyperlink, normal hyperlink. Okay, this is nothing to do with Angular here. This is just basic example, basic hyperlink. So when you click on that link, then it will go to the server and fetch this contact us page, and it will show. So if you go ahead with this approach, whenever you click on this link, it will load entire page. So that is the reason we have to avoid the default browser behavior. So we have to avoid. So that's the reason we are going to use some different directive. The default like inbuilt directive is called router link. Okay. So if you mention same link inside the router link, so now instead of browser handling this request, Angular will handle it. Okay, Angular will receive whenever you click whenever you click on this link, Angular will receive that event, and then it will basically go to that respective component you configured inside your routing configuration file. So now you are getting the difference, right? So this is where the browser will handle automatically. So that is when browser handles, it will just go to the server and try to fetch the contact us page if it is there. Okay, So it will basically trigger the entire reloading of page. But whereas this one, you will not reload the page because Angular will receive in between browser and user. Angular will be there. So Angular will receive this event, and then it will try to handle using the routing configuration file. Okay. If there is a match found for this path, then it will render that respective component inside the router outlet. Okay. Here. So that is basically navigating using the template. Okay, the template will basically we provide this inside the template, this configuration. So whenever you click on that, the template will handle that. But whereas some cases, right? So you want to navigate through the code. Okay, so how we can navigate inside the code? Okay, so let's say you want to have a button instead of a anchor tag. If you want a button, or if you want to have an image, okay, on that you can put on click event. So the click event, whenever you click, you can call this method go places, and whenever you call this method, then we have a router service inside the Angular the router module. So then we have to inject this service like this. Okay, private router and router. So this router service will be injected into your app component, and here you can basically take that router reference, and then you can call this navigate method, and navigate method takes an array something like this. Okay, so it will take segments of your URL. Okay, this is first part, and this is second part. So by calling this method, what will happen is it will go to slash users path. Okay, so that the behavior between this approach and this approach, right? So there is no difference basically. So it will work in both cases, but these are two different ways of navigating to a route inside your Angular application. Okay. And if you don't know this syntax, right? Assume that you don't know this, right? So you just want to use the string version of that path instead of using an array version. Then you can call a different method called navigate by URL. Okay, so that URL path you have to give, and again it will go and search in the routing configuration file, and if it finds any match, then it will try to render that component we configured. Okay, so these are the two ways we can basically navigate through our application. So apart from this basic example and this basic example, there are other ways also we can basically navigate. Okay, the syntax will differ. So here we just use a router link directive directly, right, without the these brackets. Okay, so the meaning of these two is when you do this, when you configure a path like this, you can just use a string version of it. Okay, string version of path. But whereas if you use these brackets, then it will expect some object or value. Okay, so the main difference is, let's say you have a student path variable inside your component. So you can assign this path, right? Whatever I highlighted using the single quotes. So this path you can put inside that student path variable, and you can just replace the highlighted part with that variable. Okay, but whereas when you do same thing here, it will basically use that as a path. Okay, it will directly consider the student path as a path. But here it will go to your component, and it will try to basically find a variable called student path and try to replace a value here with whatever value you assigned in that uh, component, app component. So there is a difference. Okay, this is just binding. Okay, so binding with a variable, or if you want to give value, then you have to use single quotes. If you want to give a direct value here, you have to use single quotes. Otherwise, if you want to give a variable, then just remove all this and put a variable here, put a variable name. But whereas in this flow, you cannot give variable name here. You have to always use a hard-coded string or hard-coded path. Okay, so that is the difference between these brackets and without brackets. Okay. So here also the difference explained. So if when I use these brackets, I use single quotes to put a string here, but whereas when I use the router link, there is no single quotes inside that. And there is also just like our navigate method, right? So it can take an array also. So here it can take an array also, array of segment path. Okay, so each segment can be inside a path. So this is one path, this is one segment, this is one segment. So now once this expression is evaluated by the Angular, it will become like this: /user/Sammy /user. The slash will be added by the Angular, then Sammy. Okay, it will become this. And if you want to use any relative paths, okay, relative path is basically path relative to the current path, current folder. So now if you want to go back to parent path, okay, then you can use 2./ and then users/Sammy. Okay, just it will append these three. That's it. It will not do any magic. Just it will append all these three in the order. Okay. So now as we already saw example, apart from this router link, we can use the router service and we can use navigate or navigate by URL. So we have to inject like this, and we can call navigate or navigate by URL like this to basically achieve same thing as we did in the template. Okay, so some cases we might need to go ahead with using the this approach, and some cases we can go ahead with this approach. Okay, it depends on your requirement. So this is the navigation. Okay, this is how you can basically navigate. And coming to root cards. So root cards are like guarding a root. Okay, basically it will guard different routes. Okay, basically let's say you have a very big application and there are many roles inside it. It can be an admin role, it can be a student role, it can be a faculty role. There are different roles, and each will have a certain set of features accessible to them. Okay, in that cases, basically we can restrict some paths or some components from being used by everyone. Okay, so if admin wants to navigate the application, all the things are accessible. Whereas the student wants to access the application, only few functionalities will be enabled for him, right? So basically, in that cases, how we can restrict that student from accessing admin side components. Okay, so in those cases, we can use a root guard. Okay, so how to create a root guard? Root guard can be created by same ng command. Okay, ng g for generate guard, or you can use I think g also short form guard, and then your guard name. Okay, so when you do this, it will basically ask what kind of auth guard you want to create. Okay, there are 3-4 types of guards. Okay, the root guards. So it can be a can activate or can activate children, or there is another thing. Okay, it will ask while you execute this command, it will ask 3 questions. So depending on your functionality, you can select any one of those 3. So I selected can activate here. That's the reason it created can activate. So we can see an example after this. So once it is created, it will just see here the injectable provider in root. Okay, but this is not a service. Okay, in the services we saw an example, right? So that is also injectable, and this is also injectable. But the service is different, and the authentication, the guard is right. So this is a guard. Guard is different. Both are different functionalities. Service is used to basically write some reusable logic, but whereas guard is used to restrict some users or some roles from accessing some content. Okay, so in those cases we are still using injectable root. Okay, that's the reason while I was telling about the services, anything injectable, right, can be put this decorator on top of it, right? So that can be used to inject it. So if you are using this, then you can basically configure this for your paths. Okay, you can inject this also, but it's not required, because when you put this one, Angular will know you're implementing this interface means that is a guard. Okay, and Angular will create an instance of this class, and it will keep inside it. And how to use that? So in order to use that path, then you can again go ahead with the same configuration, but in the path you can have the path name. I think there is a syntax issue here. The single quote must be there. So here basically your path, and here we have another property called can activate, and that can activate can take an array of values. Okay, so you can have more than one guard assigned to a single path. Okay, so here I have one guard here. It is called authentication guard, and the authentication guard I gave here, and then this is the component to render. Okay, so the can activate interface we're implementing, right? So it has a can activate method, just like ng on init. If you implement, you write implementation for on init method, right? The same way, if you are implementing can activate interface, you have to implement can activate method. Okay, so basically it will take two parameters. One is the next parameter, which is basically activated root snapshot. Okay, the activated root snapshot is nothing but whatever URL you are on. Okay, if you are on this path, that means this will hold all the information about this path. So activated. So this is activated. Application can have more than one root, right? It can have 100 roots, but at any given time, only one path is activated. So now in this example, in this page, this is the activated root. So in the same way, we have router state snapshot. Okay, it will have the router state also. These two parameters it will take, and it will return multiple types of values. It can return observable also. It can return a promise, or it can return a boolean also. Okay, or URL try. So these four types of values it can return. So that is the reason we have separate values separated by this symbol. Okay, that means or it can return this one, it can return this one, or it can return this one, or it can return four values. And while we are returning it, basically I'm returning true. True means boolean. That means this one, right? So true means a valid response type. So if it returns true, then it will activate the root, and it will go to this root. If it returns false, so even though you are trying to navigate to this path, Angular will stop. Okay, it will not render that path. Okay, so basically to depict this flow in an image, assume that you have three routes: this route, this route, and this route. Okay. Now user is trying from this route or this page to is going to this page. Okay, so there is a guard in between. Okay, it will check. Okay, checking means this code, executing this code. You can write logic here. Okay, it will check, and if it returns to the guard method returns true, it will go to this route. If it fails, then you can basically redirect to a different route. Okay, so this is how basically we can restrict. So assume that user is trying to access a page where user must be logged into view. Okay, in that case, user trying to access that page, it will go to the router guard first, and router guard will evaluate and it will return false because user is not logged in yet. So in that case, it will navigate to the login page or sign up page. Assume that user is logged in. So in that case, he is trying to access this route from this route. So the router guard will execute and will return true. If it returns true, it will go to this route instead of going to the login page. Okay, so this is how you can restrict roles, or you can basically check and validate whether user is logged in or not. So all these cases basically handled by the root guards. Okay, so we will execute these examples in next class, but I want to give just an idea. Okay, so router guard is used to protect routes. Okay, so let's go to the root params. Okay, So not only just roots, you can basically send params in the root. Okay, if you are passing data from one, if you are going from one root to another root, you can basically pass some data. Okay, something like, simple example, you have a student list in a table and you want to see each student. Okay, whenever you click on a single student, it will go to the next page and there it will show student details. Okay, it will show all the student details. So but the student details is a single component, so we cannot write 100 components for 100 students, because we have to reuse the student details component, this one. So in that case, how we can configure that root? So this is the way. You can say student details slash the student ID. So if you put colon here, that means this is a parameter. If you don't put this one, then that is a part of this path. But if you put a colon here, then this becomes your path parameter. Okay. So how can we call the path parameter using a template navigation and code level navigation, right? So in the template navigation, we can use the same array we talked about in the earlier page. So we can say users. Users is basically path, but here in this case, right, it must be student details here, and the ID must be a second parameter. Now once it is evaluated to the whole path, what will happen? Student hyphen details slash 123. Okay. So in your code, in your TypeScript code, how you can basically navigate to a route using the navigate method, right? So in the navigate method, if you want to pass a path parameter, then you can use this path prefix first, and then you can say 123, or if you have a variable, then you can put that variable name directly here. Okay. So this is how you can embed a path parameter inside the path. Okay. And the second, this is path parameters. Path parameters are nothing but it's inside a path. Okay, this is the path in any URL between the question mark and the first slash, right? That is called a path. Okay, if you're having any parameters inside this, then that is called path parameters. Whereas anything after question mark is called query parameters. Okay, so basically those are query parameters. So the difference between the path parameters and the query parameters is path parameters will be embedded inside the path. Okay, it will be inside the path, whereas query parameters are outside the path. Okay, once path is ended, then we'll have question mark, and then we can have list of query parameters. So basically, how can we send a query parameters using a template navigation? So you can have a router link and you can have a path name, and then we have another directive called query params. So query params, P is capital here, query params, and the query params will take an object. Okay. So key value pairs, it will take key value pairs. So key is a key and this is a value. Okay, if you see in this page, okay, this is the key, topic is key, and root params in Angular is a path, value. Okay, so root key here and equals value here. Okay, so if you have multiple query parameters, then what you can do is you can basically put comma here after true, and then you can have another name and another value. So it will append here. Okay, after first parameter, it will append ampersand symbol, and then it will append second parameter like this. Okay, you can basically mention as many parameters as possible. And even for same path params also, if you have more than one path parameters, then what you can do is after this slash colon ID, you can put one more slash, and then again colon and whatever variable name you want to give. Okay, if I want to give a name, student name, then how the URL will look? It will look like student hyphen details slash 123 slash, and then your colon name. Okay, student details colon ID slash colon name. Okay, that is second parameter. And here how you can send your path, comma 123 is ID, comma, and name. It can be in string like this. In string single quotes, you can give name there. Okay, here also, comma, you can send another parameter. So inside the template, you can send query parameters like this, but inside the code, TypeScript code, how you can send query parameters in the navigate method, okay, is this way. You can have after this first parameter, that means an array, okay. So far we saw an array, right? So this is an array. But after this array, you can put comma and you can basically send an object, okay. The single, the floor basis is an object in JavaScript, right? Object, and the object will have a parameter called query parameters is a key. And again, just like this, you can have key value pairs, the whole object of key value pairs. Okay, so whenever this method is called, Angular will automatically navigate to this path. Excuse me. No, okay, the half of work is done. Okay, all good. I'm sending this 1, 2, 3 or any name parameters, whatever from here, from the configuration. But what is the point of sending it? Okay, the whole point of sending this is to receive it from somewhere. Okay, so how we can receive that values passed in the path parameters or query parameters, right? So assume that you have a component. So I didn't mention all the thing because the point is to cover the routing, right? So I didn't give this. So we'll assume that we have a component called orders component, and Angular provides another service called activated route. Okay, so now we can take that activated route as an injector here. Yeah. So we can inject activated route, and then um, we can use this reference to basically get those parameters. Okay, so now we have ng on-init method. So inside that we have to write some code to receive that data. Now let's say this dot root dot params dot subscribe. Okay, params is a observable. Okay, params is an observable. Okay, we saw observables, right? Subjects and observables. So params is
Yes.
an observable. So params dot subscribe. So subscribe, once you subscribe it, it will return you a params array. Okay, a params object. So now you want to access the ID. ID means the ID I'm configured here, right? The same name we have to use. So I have ID configured here. That's the reason we are giving path parameter in name. Okay. So for this parameter, my name is ID. So here what we have to do, we have to use the same name here. Okay. The ID parameter passed is 1, 2, 3 there, for example. Then once you navigate to this orders component, it will basically print this line. The idea of this route is params start ID 1, 2, 3. Okay, the idea of this route is 1, 2, 3. So the same way, in order to consume query params, what you can do is you can basically use the same route object, and then you can say query param map. Instead of params, you can say query param map dot subscribe. Again, this is an observable. Then it will return a params array, and then you can basically print that. So just like params start ID or topic or anything. So here in the case, it's a topic. So here what you have to do, params dot topic. It will print this value. Okay. So what is the advantage of this then? Okay. In that case, let's see the example again. Okay. So the student list example we have, and once user clicked on the student, single student row, like view student, then it will navigate to this path and to student details component, and we are passing ID as 1, 2, 3. In the student details component, the onInit method, you have to write this code so that by this time you will get the student ID. Okay, after this line, what you can do is you can call a backend service to get data for that student, that single student 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you can say basically that HTTP client dot get, and you can call that API and pass that parameter as a path parameter to that API. So immediately that API will return some data back to you. So once you get that data, then you will render that data inside the student details component. That is the same component. Okay. So for that purpose, we can basically use the path parameters or query parameters. So in this way, we can write only single student details component, and it can be used across all the students. It can be like 1 lakh students also, or like 50,000 students. It doesn't matter. So only single component will be used across for all the students. So only whenever you click on different row, only the student ID will change. And once the student ID is changed, the API call will go to the server backend, and then you get data, and then you render the data inside the student details component using the interpolation. Okay. So any questions so far?
No.
Okay. So we covered till root parameters, and so in some cases, we might need child routes also. Okay, child routes also an important topic here. So child routes are basically useful in certain scenarios. Okay, if you see this example, I have product list where I'll show all the products, and then once you click on a product, I'll go to the product details page, and then I'll be basically showing basically for that particular product information about that particular product. So inside that, I need to have different sections. Okay, so I can have an overview section, I can have a technical specifications of that product, and I can have a review section, and I can have a rating section. So there will be many things, right? So and it is the same product, but same product can have all these things separate. So once user clicks on overview tab, I'll be showing overview of that product. And once user clicks on technical specs of that tab, then I'll be showing technical specifications of that product. Once user clicks on reviews, customer reviews tab, I'll be showing customer reviews for the same product. Okay. So in that case, we need to have a children roots. Okay. So how to define children roots? So this one we already saw. So in order to define children roots, after this you can put a comma and just have a children array. Okay. It's a children array attended here, and the children has two subroots. Okay, it has a overview section and it has a spec section. Okay, overview again, each child root has same configuration. Okay, path, component or outlet and same things, right? So it has a path and it has components. This is a overview component, this is a specs component. And once you navigate to product details and that product ID here, and then when you click on the overview link, then it will append here product details slash product ID slash overview. Once you click on specs, it will go to product details slash product ID slash specs. Okay, that URL also will look good. But in order to basically show these components, the child components or child roots, okay, we should have the router outlet inside this also. Okay, let's say you have you're displaying all this product list and other components inside the app component, then you must have in app component you must have router outlet there. But in order to render child routes, then you must have the router outlet inside the product details page also. So then only these child routes will be rendered here inside this product page, product details page. Okay, so like this. This is an example, but in the product details page, you should have router outlet. Okay, this router outlet is to render the children, but in the app component, we will have one more router outlet, right? That is to render the parent routes or parent components. Okay, so here I'll have assume that this is the product details component. Here I can have a router link overview and router link specs. So whenever you click on this tab, it will render the overview component here. Okay, and when you click on the product details link or tab, it will basically go to specs and it will render specs because I'm rendering specs path here in this route link. Okay, you'll have this content same, but only this section will be changing whenever you click on overview and product details. Okay, and I think this one we already covered. How to redirect to known route. Okay, I have welcome route and I have welcome component, and let's say when there is no path mentioned, then you should go to some path, some component, right? So in that case, otherwise it will show empty. So instead of that, I can redirect to the existing route. Existing route here is welcome, and I'm redirecting to the same welcome route, and we are saying path match full. So path match full means match this whole thing, and then no, sorry, match this whole thing basically empty. Then if it matches, redirect to this path. Okay, this path again will go to welcome component. Here we did not define any component. We defined where to go. Okay, we defined where to go. So we defined here to go, welcome, and welcome has this component. So this component will be rendered. Okay, so this is basically empty route redirection. And sometimes what can happen, you can basically the path match, you can take two values, full and prefix. So prefix means if it matches the first part of the URL, like this one, half path, then also it will redirect. But if you mention full, then it has to match full path, then only it will redirect. Okay, and sometimes user might enter unknown route also, right? So random routes, when he clicks on something but that path is not there, then we, instead of showing the empty page, we should basically tell where to go. Okay, you can have some custom page not found component where it will show this page is not found, can you go back to the home page or products page. So that for that we can have a page not found component, and then we can put this syntax here, 2 stars. That means anything that doesn't match in the all these paths above this will go here. Okay, so this way you can basically increase the user experience. So instead of showing some empty page, if you put this single line here having a page not found component, then basically you can basically neatly present and that page is not found, user can go to a different section of your application instead of showing the empty page. Okay, so any questions here so far?
No, sir.
Okay, so I want you to go through the documentation again so that you'll get a good idea, and then in next class we can basically try to execute all these examples and see how they are working.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
See you on Monday, maybe, because it's a weekend.
Yeah, sure, fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, bye. Thank you.